Okay, Irwin, we're so excited that you're able to join us tonight and to chat with us. So, just to start, we're wondering if you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I start off usually now. Um, you know what? Let me just say, both of you, in my estimation, are kind of like rock stars now in the child rights field. And so it's more exciting for me to be with you. And so, you ask me who I am, my background. Right now, I'm an old man in his basement with a cell phone. It's amazing what an old white guy in his basement can do with a cell phone, but that's who I am, and so I'm a follower of both of you, because you're the vanguard now. I used to be the child advocate for Ontario for 12 years, from 2008 to 2009. I ran a center for young people leaving care of child welfare agencies in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area. I did that for 20 years. Worked in children's mental health as a service director, and I'm a parent of two boys, 13 and 16, and a husband. That's who I am.
What does child and youth advocacy mean to you?
That guided us about what we were to do. Every child advocate that in the country that exists still has their own act that gives them instruction, and the definition in our act I liked. Um, Lucky for me. And it said that advocacy was partnering with children and youth to bring their issues forward. I like that definition. And I think for me, the key word was always partnership. And it meant that um, a young person was directing the partnership. They could ask us to bring their issues forward for them. That was part of the partnership. They could ask us to work together with them and jointly bring their issues forward, whether individually or collectively as a group. And sometimes they could ask us to support them to bring their issues forward. And I thought about it as I did when I did work as I was supervising child and youth care students, as not students, workers. I thought about our service as a partnership. We weren't going to do things for young people, especially if they were trying to be independent, unless they asked us to do it for them. And oftentimes they might say, you know what, I want to go to that job interview, but I'm a little nervous. Would you go with me to the job interview? But you don't have to come in, just come with me. So we're walking alongside them, not in front of them. Sometimes they'd say, I need to do something with my worker, but I'm not going to say it. So I need you to go say it for me. So sometimes we'd go in front of them and they'd say, take the bullet for us. And sometimes they'd say, you know what? I just want you to hear what I'm about to do and be there when I come back. I'll let you know how it goes. And that was us standing and walking behind them. And I think that is what advocacy is. How you part, and that's advocacy for children for sure, in my point of view. But it's advocacy with anybody. It's advocacy with seniors who need a voice now too, and need partners to bring their issues forward in long-term care homes. I think of them, and I think about uh, all the fuss that some have made about the deficit during COVID in the seniors' homes. I haven't really heard from any seniors in the seniors' homes. What do they think needs to be done? What do they think about the quality of their life? Nobody asks. Just like kids in care, just like children in general, nobody asks. We'll decide for them, and that is not advocacy, in my point of view. Because I can talk a lot, but I just want to say this because I think it's important for your students to know or think about, in my estimation, if you do not walk alongside, if you do not partner with, you can do harm. Because any system your students will eventually work in, child welfare, the school system, youth justice system, children's mental health, disability system, in my estimation, is dehumanizing. It makes objects out of people. It makes files out of people. It makes cases out of people. And so if you're not partnering with the children in those systems, you are further dehumanizing them, and you're not, and that's not advocacy. Advocacy is making and ensuring people are subjects in the world, including children. So that's what I think advocacy is.
Okay, Irwin, thank you so much for that. Our next question is actually really related to our last question. So you've
Mhm.
actually sort of touched on it already. But in
Okay.
your opinion, what makes someone a good advocate? And what advice would you give to our students who want to pursue advocacy work? Because a lot of them do want to get into this field.
I that's a loaded question, right? Because I would say it's not me. I would say not me. I think that, and you're this the answers are kind of trite, but I'm sure your students have heard be genuine, right? So be yourself. Um, I don't. I hear a lot, and I know I've talked a lot about this triggering word for young people about love, and people said, "I have to. You have to love your kids." No, I don't think you can. I don't think you should expect that of yourself. And I don't. But what I think you can do, if you want to be a good advocate, is expect yourself to be curious. When the time comes when you're not curious any longer, when you're meeting a youth or when you're talking to young people, it's time to hang up your hat. And I would say that in terms of service, because I think when whatever job child and youth care workers take, in any of those sectors I talked about before, they have the opportunity to be an advocate. You don't have to work in a child advocate's office or a advocacy institution or organization to be an advocate. Every day, you can be an advocate by ensuring young people have a voice, have some sense of control. And the way you do that is by being curious. And I mean, like, when a young person says they want to do X, Y, or Z, I want to move in, I'm thinking, I want to move in with my boyfriend. And you think that's a really dumb idea. And you might be curious about why they want to do that. What's the problem you're trying to solve? And be interested in their lives. Don't make the decision for them. And in that curiosity, people usually assume caring. And actually, it's a trick on yourself. You might not be able to love every child, but if you force yourself to be curious, you will end up caring about them. You can't be curious and not care. And you can't be genuine and not be curious. And I think that's the key, and you can do that, and I think people can do that in any position they hold. They're already child advocates, and if they're in your class, they're already child advocates, and that's what I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think it's really interesting, right, to define and think about advocacy that way, because what I've come to realize is really how complex this idea of advocacy can be and how many different ways you can think about it, right? And who is an advocate, right? And like one person thinks about advocacy this way, but you could really think about it in so many different ways. And I remember you telling me one time, advocacy is also about recognizing that sometimes speaking on behalf of someone can be harmful when they want to speak for themselves. So I think your whole idea about partnership is so relevant to some of the things that Christine and I are trying to teach in our class. And
Yeah.
so I like that. I really like that way of thinking about advocacy.
Outlier way, right? But it's not. It's just I've told you this before, I'm sure, but I think it's because I'm not that bright. So I think of it that way. But people are more bright than me. They talk about, and I learned it as I was Ontario's child advocate. They talk about duty bearers and rights holders, and I'm actually talking about the same thing. I just don't know that language, right? I know a duty bearer is somebody who should be curious and not speak for a child, but figure out what the child wants and support them in a plan to get what they want, move on with their life. That's the duty bearer, and that's a worker. That's a child and youth care worker. But if you don't want to be need know that language of that industry, and I don't say that in a pejorative way this time, then yeah, it's the same thing. It's and young people will say it's not rocket science, although it is hard to do.
I think it's a really good point, and kind of leads to one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the work that you're doing on legislating love, and what does it mean to legislate love?
That term to me came from a conversation I had with a deputy minister, because I'll speak to your students. You can imagine I'm talking to you guys the way I would talk to a deputy, because I don't know any other way of speaking. And the deputies would get very irritated, sometimes roll their eyes. And a deputy said to me like once, "Oh, what do you want me to do with that?" And I think he would have said that crap if he wasn't as nice. But what do you want me to do with that crap, Irwin? We can't legislate love. And I actually didn't really have a great answer for that. And I went back to the office, and we had youth leaders working for us. And I was telling them, yeah, he said this, because I have no filter and I'm not good about confidentiality. So I just tell them, yeah, he said this. I didn't know what to say. And this person, this youth leader, said, you know what? You should have said, yeah, it's true. You can't legislate love, but you can legislate the conditions in which love can flourish. And I thought, oh, why didn't you come with me and tell? But and young people, like, they do these mic drops, like they don't and like when she did that, I can tell you 100 of them, but when she told me that, it's like and I know probably nobody uses the term mic drop anymore because I know what it is. They mic drop it, and you think she doesn't even know how brilliant that comment was. Like you could write an essay, you could write big long papers about that, and she just puts it in the comment and it's done. And I kept it in my head and my heart, I guess. And people used to say, well, okay, what does that mean? And I thought, yeah, okay, that's going to be, especially now that I'm retired. That doesn't mean retired people, for all you people have parents, when they retire, it doesn't mean they don't do anything or they just lie in bed and eat chocolates. That's probably not going to be it. They'll do things. So because I'm retired doesn't mean I'm not trying to still be a useful engine like Thomas the Tank. So I still try and be helpful. And I decided, um, as a Laidlaw fellow, because Laidlaw Foundation of Ontario asked me to be a fellow and give them some time every month. And the project I said I wanted to think about and work on was, okay, what does that mean? How do you create conditions in which love can flourish? What are the ways? And the more I've talked about it, the more I've said to people in various systems, it's not just child welfare, but it could be, is if your focus is to create the conditions in which care love can flourish. And I want to say, just a quick aside, I used the word love because a deputy used it. I think if I didn't have my way, I might, if I had my way, I might not use it, but it really works for the general public. For young people in care, it can be a triggering word, right? Like, what the hell is love, right? Well, it's true for all of us, but for young people in care, it can be triggering. So I use it because it makes the point. It makes the point of uh, somebody who's there for me, somebody who respects me, somebody who understands me, somebody who knows me, a place where I can belong. All those kinds of things is what I think young people think about when they talk about this kind of love. And so I think, oh, when ministry, you boot young people out of their foster homes at 18, even if they don't want to leave, does that help create the conditions in which love can flourish? I think not. And I know you do too. So don't do that. Do something else. Hey, ministry, when you allow children to be in residential care and there's holdings every night of the week and you never check up on what's going on in that group home, there's no standards of care for group homes, they're not funded properly, you pay group home staff, minimum wage and have no standards for who should be there, there's no accrediting body like the Child and Youth Care Association, all those things. And I'm saying that because maybe some students are child and youth care workers, I don't know. Oh, does all that help create the conditions in which love can flourish? I don't think so, and neither do you. So don't do that. What can you do then that can create conditions where young people and children can get what they need to flourish? Because we know that that's what they tell us is their primary concern. They want to have a voice and they want to be understood and they want somebody to be there for them. Relationships and voice. And so, how do we make sure we get that? If you don't allow young people to have some decision making ability in their lives, do they think that you love and care for them and understand them if you don't listen to them? No, we know that they wouldn't because we don't. They're humans, right? So then don't do that. Listen to them. And you've now created the conditions in which love can flourish. Funny that. And I'm almost done, but we know that because, some of us have partners, married and have partners. And it's that thing about listening. What are the conditions you can make your love flourish in your partnership, your relationship with your partner? Was the number one thing that women are always telling men for sure. Could you just listen? Like, listen, but not the Irwin Elman listen where I say, yes, dear. The last thing you just said was blah, 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 blah. And she gets more angry at me because she said, not that kind of listening. Could you just listen? Be there, be present, listen, understand me. Yeah, that builds love in relationships. That builds love in systems, in workers. So I'm interested in moving government to create policy that creates those conditions. And I'm not afraid because I'm got nothing to lose. I'm not afraid of saying it, like saying the love word and saying love flourish and saying what you're doing doesn't fix that, doesn't create that. What you're doing. It's a long story, but institutional solution to a human problem. And young people want human solutions to human problems. And that, I'm going to say, last thing I'd say, that's in your students. That's your students. They're the human solution. Yeah.
That's perfect, Irwin. Yeah, thanks for that. I always like when you talk about this in my class. I find that it really, really resonates with students, and that's something that really sticks with them.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for that. I think our last question is also sort of connected to all the other questions we asked. So I wanted to just chat a little bit about COVID and ask you, what are some of the challenges that children and young people continue to face as we are continuing to respond to COVID? And how can we approach these challenges from an advocacy lens?
Yeah. So COVID, yeah. Boy, I've been thinking a lot about because I've been supporting. I don't like to. They didn't need my help, but I've offered to support this group of youth who are calling for a post-pandemic youth mental health recovery strategy, and it's a group. It's an interesting group. It's a group of 20 now, Syrian Canadian, mostly Syrian Canadian. Young students, professionals, most of them refugees from Syria, and they're saying they've seen. They're saying the pandemic is traumatizing for some young people, particularly those who are most marginalized, and it's kind of like trauma on top of trauma. So it's young people in care, people who are disabled, or people who young people connected to uh, the youth justice system, racialized young people, Black young people, refugee youth, who've already come through trauma, and now the pandemic both causes them worry, but also isolates them and makes access to resources and connection and belonging even more difficult. So it's trauma on top of trauma. And they've said that when they were in the one, I remember them saying, when they were in Syria, the students that were in Aleppo and in a war zone, they said they realized that one, if you come together as a community, um, that's something that can be helpful. And two, that the trauma didn't hit them till they settled, meaning settled as a person. Like the war is over, they move to Canada and they feel safe, and that's when trauma hits. So they're saying for their worry is that for young people and children, the pandemic and being isolated and the worry and the summer of of anti-Black racism and Donald Trump in the United States, and even before that, the environmental crisis that people were hearing about, all of that all together, when the pandemic is finally over, if the light at the end of the tunnel comes with the vaccine, they're saying that's when the trauma will notice the trauma. And we believe, they're saying, as people who've experienced that, we don't want anybody to ever have to go through what we did. So we are saying there should be uh, a strategy, a national strategy, as important as an economic recovery strategy, a well-being strategy for children and youth to recover from what we've just been through, and I add, and build back better. So we don't go back to normal, but we build back better systems and services and processes that let love flourish. So I think about them when I answer that question. And then I think about just the other day, I got a Facebook message from a youth I knew 25 years ago in from that center I worked in Toronto. She was in care. She's not a youth anymore. She's probably 40. I don't ask ages anymore because that makes me feel old. But she's probably 40. But I knew her when she was a teenager, and we still connect from time to time. She graduated from Fleming College. Sorry, Trent, but Fleming College in Peterborough in outdoor recreation, and she had a job all the time. She had a place. She didn't have family because leaving care, you dumped out on your own, so she didn't really have family, but her work and fitness helped her find a community, somewhere to feel good about. And I thought she was doing well. So COVID happened, and she couldn't work because there's no rec jobs, right? So she lost her job. She got evicted because the landlord that she had took over the house that she was sharing with three other people. Not, they weren't friends, but they rented a house, but the landlord just booted them out. Something to do with COVID. So she got evicted, and she had nowhere to go. She couldn't go. She had no family, no nothing. She couldn't go to the gym any longer. So her community about fitness was gone. And she was emailing me she's from Toronto, and she was living in a motel room in Niagara Falls because she only had a little bit of money left in her savings. And that's what she could do. Because the hotel rooms or motel rooms in Niagara Falls were cheaper by the month than they were in Toronto. And she's been there, I think it's been about 5-6 months now, trying to wait COVID out by herself in a room in a motel. And of course, she starts thinking about her lives, and she just feels like, what? She's saying to me, what happened? Like, I thought I built to life. I thought I overcame. How did everything just unravel? And now obviously she's, her mental health is suffering. Um, yeah, it's heartbreaking, really. But that's my worry about how the system is affecting, some people who had come through service, and what's happened to them when they go back to zero, and how is she going to start over again? And she's really asking herself that. And how is she going to trust everything is going to be okay if she starts over again? And then I'm hearing from I'm hearing from some youth leaders who work with young people in the foster care system who are actually still in the foster care system in foster homes. And this person said, this one young girl in the foster home said, life in the foster home was really suffocating, But now with the lockdown, it's double suffocating. You can't even get out of the house to get away from your life. And it's really difficult. And she said she was living in a house, and it's incredible, really. It's in a foster home where the 4 foster children lived in one foster home, and the foster parents with their birth, they would say natural kids, that's how kids in care call, with the birth family kids, they're living in another foster home across the street with can you imagine? This is a foster home. And she didn't want to live there, but there was no way to move because we're in this COVID, and workers aren't coming to visit because we're in this COVID, so they're doing online stuff. And I think we already didn't know what was going on for many children in homes, or the parents of kids with disabilities who are struggling with online learning, and the parents who already were struggling to support their children in school. And now, if they're having to go to work, their kids are there, alone, online learning and not learning a thing because there's no special ed approach to the online learning. It's just a lot of struggle, I think, on top of struggle for so many young people. And then I would say to you, the 2 other groups I think about are the race, the heroes, the what we call quote quote heroes, the people in the grocery stores, the nurses, the people in the seniors homes, the Uber drivers, the anybody who's working. They're not rich people, and they have to work. They're the ones, they're essential services. And guess what? Yeah, their wages are lower than many of us, and they're racialized. It's not a secret. And so they're suffering double. But we don't pay attention to that. And then I'm at home with my kids, with my wife who works from home, and I'm retired, and we're saving money because of COVID. We don't spend as much, so we're saving money. We're fine, and we spend lots of time with our kids. And I'm in the basement because I talk too loud on Zoom, and my wife's in the first floor doing in the kitchen right now. I know, and my sons are in their rooms with their Nintendo because it's screen time. Life is grand. We're not those people I just talked about, and it is not okay. And it's not that I think I should have less. I think that I would want a country where everybody has the same privilege that I have. Yeah, maybe I have to give up some privilege in terms of power, but not in lifestyle. I don't. I'm not like extremely wealthy. I don't say all that to say, look how much money I have. I think I'm just an old white man in his basement, and that comes with a lot of privilege, and that others don't have. Yeah, so that's what I think about COVID. And I think what could people do? First thing, because I asked students, another class I talked to, and I was asking them, how is it on your students? And I'm curious, how are your students doing with COVID? Is it easy? And I thought it wouldn't be that hard. One student said to me, she's exhausted. And I was asking, and it was in a Zoom thing. Why are you exhausted? Like, I wasn't being rude, I don't think. I was saying, I don't get it. Why are you exhausted? Because you're at home. You've got Zoom classes and you can. She said, because there's a lot of pressure on us as students. And if I can't go out of my room or the house, then if I don't do my work, I feel guilty. So I'm always doing the work. So you can't get away from the pressure. And it is emotionally exhausting. It's not like physically tiring, it's just emotionally exhausting to just be in one place, not move, and have this constant pressure. So I'd say to your students, take care of themselves. That's the first thing. They are no good to the world unless they take care of themselves. Meaning, good to the world, meaning if their project is to do something in the world that makes a difference, they can't unless they do take care of themselves. That's got to be priority number one. And I don't know what that is, different for everybody. And then I think you listen, find ways to use technology, find ways to talk and listen and be curious. You can do that in a pandemic, and there is nothing more important to that girl in that motel room in Niagara Falls than somebody, and it's not just me, but somebody who will answer her message on Facebook Messenger and listen. Say, yeah, that's pretty shitty. Yep. Not I can't solve it, but there I understand. Halfway home. And your students can do that in a time of COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's a difficult thing to think about. We know the inequalities that young people were facing before. We see how it's being enhanced by COVID-19. One of the things that I actually don't think gets as much attention as it should, and Christine and I have talked a lot about this,
Mm-hmm.
is looking at how young people are finding really unique kind of participatory spaces to be doing advocacy and activism.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of attention to that. And I think it's important to think about that too.
Yeah, and for sure. So that group of young people, Syrian young people, are doing everything online. They're so damn talented. Like, oh my gosh! And there's so many groups of young people that's popping up, just even supporting each other, right? And having I know there's a group that does a youth roundtable in Saskatchewan, or Manitoba Voices for Youth and Care did a Christmas Eve party, and then we did one too, bringing young people together. And it's really interesting because old people like me used to think, and I don't know, but used to think you have to physically be with people. Like we have a group isn't a group unless you're in a meeting in a room and you have a group meeting and you eat together. Well, who would have thought that no, you can actually have a group without being physically together? Not old people, but young people, your generation too, but even younger, like they're going, duh, like yes, it's possible. And when old people like me say, how did you meet your partner? And somebody says, I met them on Facebook. Like I know them on Facebook. Everybody knows somebody now. Well, you guys have Tinder and whatever the hell that is, but you meet and they talk and it's 90 Day Fiance and now they're in love and they think they know each other because of Facebook. And old people like me are going, you don't know that person from Facebook. And they go, yeah, we do. Not possible. You can't know somebody till you meet them. I did meet them. It was on Zoom or chat, and we can't get it. But now the pandemic has forced, a whole generation of people to show us how that can be. And I just hope we use that for good, meaning the people in positions of power can use that for good, not to limit service, not because it's cheaper, but we find ways of harnessing what we learned from young people and really continue to let, and anybody who's under 50 is young to me. So continue to let young people continue to lead and old people step back and learn.
We've been focusing a lot on in the last few months. And we wrote a paper on how young people are participating in unique ways using the internet, like using the internet to teach other young people and to teach adults about how to sanitize your hands and how to protect yourself during COVID. We've seen examples of young people developing tutoring services to help their peers while they're out of school. And just so many other examples. So we've been, like I said, just interested in looking at the challenges that young people face, but also, looking at all of these unique ways that they're also participating within their own lives.
It's really good. But you know what? It's for old people. I don't know what adult is, but for older people who they're teaching, it's kind of whack-a-mole, right? Because we're noticing it. And what happens is like and I'm sure your students hate this. I don't know if you guys do. When and I think of myself, but when I learned how to do TikTok, so I got a TikTok channel. It's like, could you just don't go on TikTok? My son, do not do that. It's embarrassing. Don't do it. And then he went on, because he's a gamer, Discord. Now I have a Discord channel. Well, now you guys are always moving, so the old people can't keep up to know what the tools are, which is great because young people are going to continue to use these new tools that we won't know how to use, right? So it will force young people to, it will create avenues for young people to take leadership because it's space where there's nobody there to take the power away from them. If I'm not on Discord, I can't tell them how to do it. I can't talk like this. I can't go on and on. They got their space. They can do what they can do their thing. And I think that's really kind of an interesting piece of technology and social media that's happening. And it's giving young people some power that they didn't have. Um, they have each other through uh, technology that we don't know. The rest, older people don't know how to use. Yeah. You know, you're gonna ask me. I know we're almost done, right? And you were gonna ask me what the project, what advice do I have for your students or something like that?
Yeah, what kind of, if you have any, like a question that our students can think
Yeah,
about.
question. I did have one because what popped to my mind. You know what? There's when if they're in policy, um, these days there used to be everything. There used to be lots of talk about outcome measures. Then there was collective impact. I don't know if you remember collective impact or heard about that. It was a way of developing policy. And now, these days, collective impact's kind of dead. And now government is talking always, and policy people, theory of change. Everything's theory of change, theory of change. And really, it's all a variation on a theme. But you know, they should know, you should know what the language of policy development or change is. A theory of change is really just about um, form follows function, which is even older than outcome measures. Know what you're trying to achieve and then try and get there. But you start with, what are you trying to do? What is not do, what's the outcome you want, and how are you going to get there? So I remember a cartoon about theory of change, and it was this group of people on a beach, and they were obviously, some of them were construction workers, and some were the managers, and they were building a bridge, and the bridge was started on the beach, and it was going right across this big, looked like the ocean, going across the ocean, and it was half built, so the bridge stopped about halfway across the ocean, and it wasn't completed. And in the foreground of the picture, the manager, the guy who's in charge of construction, saying, ah, maybe we should have built a boat instead of a bridge. And I thought, yeah. So I tell you that because my question that I think your students should ask themselves is, what's my project? What is it I want to do? What's the change in the world I want to influence? And then once they know that, they should have faith in themselves, so everything they do after that answers that question. Is this helping me build that bridge I want to build? Is this helping me build that boat I've said I want to build? And be intentional and have confidence in yourself. And do not, I've said this to classes too, do not have the expectation that you can change the world. You might, it could be Greta, but who else? How many Gretas have we seen? You might not be able to change the world, and don't put that burden on yourself, especially if you're in an equity group that is, and you're fighting for something that is a huge burden, and don't accept it. You can't change everything. I don't think that's a fair burden for people to carry. But tell yourself you're not exempt from trying, because if you try, you'll have influence. So create your project. Don't think you're going to change the world with your project, but be intentional about taking your place in the world's work and the world's struggles. But it starts with that question you have to ask yourself: what's my goal here? What's my project? And they'll change the world piece by piece, and I have faith in them. I'm gonna follow them. Lots of old people are gonna follow them. Not follow just on Facebook. I'll do that too, but we'll follow your lead.